Hello, this is John Huey and my co-host Michael Tingley,
Hello.
and we are here at the Sober Atheist podcast. You hit the right button if that's what you're looking for. And now we're at episode 27, and our last topic was very succinct. There was really no question about what we were discussing then. But here, maybe we're a little bit more open-ended, and I'll be asked to explain myself once or twice as we go through this thing.
You can count on that.
Oh, I know. I can rest assured, all right, that somebody will ask me awkward, penetrating questions in order to elicit the veracity of what I'm propounding here
What
today.
the hell are you talking about, John?
Exactly. That's a very nice way of putting it. Thank you very much. But we got a topic and an episode here for you today, and it's called "Why Atheism Works: A Recovery Journal," and it sort of popped into my mind when I was thinking about the journey I've had over the many years I've been associated with recovery programs, and all the while being a lifelong, very committed atheist and encountering some challenges and opportunities along the way as a result. And, I come from where I come from. I am who I am, and I live in the environment and worked in the environment I worked in, which was downtown Washington, D.C., over many, many years, doing what I do in the business that I happened to fall into back in the early 80s. And, it is what it is, and I am what I am. But I found that when I started this recovery thing, that I was in for a whole new journey in a very different way than anything I'd really encountered before. Because I found myself associated with a group of people who I felt could really be of help and assistance to me. But what they were propounding and their philosophy, that the only way forward really involved a path involving faith, that I found myself as a newly sober person back in the first weeks of 1987, very much feeling very much alone, even though I was surrounded by friendly, well-intentioned people. And I don't want to say one bad thing about the people that I encountered when I first came around, because they were friendly, as I said, friendly, well-intentioned people that really gave me the impression that they had my best interests at heart. Because I came in and I was not, I wasn't on the street or down and out. I had a very good job at good place to live, and people around me and all of this other stuff. But I psychologically, emotionally, physically was really in a very, very kind of rough place. And I think that was probably obvious to these folks who saw me and encountered me early on. And they were very kind, very nice, and very good to me in a lot of ways.
So, when you first got sober, you went to AA meetings.
Now, I don't like to discuss that.
Well,
name,
but did you?
That's where I went.
Did you at least try to go along with what was being proposed in those meetings, or were you from day one opposed to some of the philosophical concepts behind the 12 steps?
But from day one, I knew that I could never become a person of faith that would allow me to entrust my life and my will and my mind and my actions to something that I knew didn't exist.
Yeah.
But these folks were so adamant that these so-called steps and some of these books and some of these other items that they used to assist them in their road to recovery, their road to sobriety, that I really investigated all of that. All right. I read all of the published literature that program publishes. There's quite a number of books other than the main tome that they rely on. And I even went to the extent of looking into some of what they called the underpinnings of what the program was about from the early days, which involved things like reading, William James, a variety of religious experience, and looking into some of Carl Jung's philosophy about the unity of the human condition based on otherworldly influences. I mean, I had from my college days Jung on my shelf, and there was a very interesting book about myths and symbols that I had used back in college. And I was not unfamiliar with William James because I was in literature. I don't know if I've ever worked my way all the way through it because it's incredibly voluminous. But his brother Henry James was a key literary influence, and William James entered into that. So I had read some William James in my uh, literature studies back in my college days. So I was fairly well grounded in what they were saying. But after those investigations, it just became abundantly clear that this so-called spiritual experience I was supposed to have would never, ever, ever be something that I would say applied to me. I never said it didn't apply to others, okay? I never went up to people and shook them by the collar and said, this is idiotic, what are you doing? Right? Within the context of those meetings. But I was very open about my own, skepticism and my own lack of engagement with what they were doing. Mm-hmm. And that posed some problems. Although I did begin to form some friendships with people who held those beliefs, some of whom are friends of mine to this day, right? Because we were like together in a place, in a time, at an age, coming up in this whole idea of getting and staying sober and what that can mean to ourselves and our families and our work and all that. That and we had similar abilities and abilities to comprehend and converse on a level that was compatible with us because of who and what we are. So that all that was good, but there was this area of separation where I could always feel that they were just sort of backing away a little bit, backing away because I really was not a member of the tribe. All right.
Well, I remember it feeling just inadequate and like I was failing at this sobriety business because I didn't have a spiritual experience and I didn't feel that spiritual connection that they talk about in the 12 steps. And that's for me, that was like negative because I was feeling inadequate and a failure at sobriety because I didn't have those things that I was supposed to have.
Yeah. Well, I've got a big ego and I never felt inadequate at all. Okay. All right. About that shit. I did feel a little bit alone and I did feel a little bit separate.
Yeah.
And that those early days was a year and a half before the formation of the first meeting in Washington for atheists and agnostics. So there literally wasn't any other path. And I just focused on the fact that I had tried to get and stay sober on my own in 1985, and I'd failed. I, had about 8 or 9 months sober. I'm sure I've talked about this before.
Did you go to
And
meetings during that time?
no,
No.
I went to a physician who told me that I had so much to drink that I had caused a condition in my inner ear. And he looked at me and said, I don't know how you did this, but you did it. And he shook his head. That he was an English guy. And he shook his head and he looked at me and he said, well, you're a fairly bright person. Don't you know that alcohol is a poison? Right. And having that doctor say that to me, a guy I respected, I liked him. He had treated my late wife, and he knew some of my friends, and he was a good guy. He put up with the DuPont Circle hippies at the time, and he was a good guy. And the DuPont Circle hippies, who are now occupied, they're kicked out, but the neighborhood's now occupied by the National Guard. That very same neighborhood, right? This doctor says scared me straight for a while, and I felt a lot better when I stopped drinking. I was being more productive. I was getting ready to launch a new career, a new path, and I found myself just in better shape altogether, right? But at not the first opportunity, but when an opportunity with a former girlfriend presented itself out at dinner one night, and she was somebody that knew full well that I was an alcoholic and what I was all about, but she still suggested that we split a bottle of wine, and I did that, right? And that little bottle of wine led me to slide down further than I ever thought was possible. Stopping was one thing, starting again was another. And that slide down that slope, right, was I saw, did things and went places that I never had gone before. And I saw death approaching, to be quite honest. And I've never been suicidal. I'm not prone to that sort of thinking, but that's where I was at the end of my drinking at the end of 1986. It was life or death. So, the thing that brought me in to start dealing with him in that program was pretty much of a binary choice, right? And I found that I did get some relief. The physical action of going to those meetings every day was good for me. And that physical action in terms of listening and being listened to, right, was an important reinforcement for a daily commitment to stay sober. That part I saw. The meetings and the fellowship, as you mentioned many times, Michael, the meetings and the fellowship were key. So I found myself in a kind of weird, interesting situation because I've got the kind of personality that if you really displease me, well, unless of course you're paying me lots and lots of money. I make a lot of allowances for people with lots and lots of money that pay me to do things. I like stuff, but if you're not to any kind of context where I have the ability to say fuck you and walk away, I'll do that. If somebody is doing or acting or proposing things in a way that I would categorically reject, like I categorically rejected the religious and spiritual underpinnings of that program right from the beginning, with no reservations, without hesitation. But what I hesitated about was being disconnected from people who were on the road to recovery, who had my best interests at heart, And as individuals, I had their best interests at heart,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And people that show compassion to you and listen to you and help you are doing a good thing,
Right.
particularly when you're in a situation where the consequences of failure were so extreme. I'm no saint. If I could get away with it, I'd do it. All right. If I could live the raucous bohemian life until age 76, I would have done that. I would have, absolutely would have done that. I was having too much fucking fun. I was able to do all kinds of stuff that I like to do. All right.
Right.
But the effects of that, the price of that, the desperation that came from living that way, it just is something that could be avoided if I continued on that path.
Mm-hmm.
So they're caterwauling about their spiritual life and their, brotherhood of the spirit and all that stuff didn't really compare to the abyss I saw at the end of my drinking.
Mm-hmm.
It helped. And going to those meetings, because I had friends there and I spoke in a way that seemed to be useful to others, indicated to me that I wasn't altogether doing a bad thing going to those places. All right. There was nobody scooping me up like Jim Jones to take me to Guyana to work on a banana farm. All right. It wasn't that wasn't in the cards. It wasn't that kind of deal. This was, liberal downtown DC, Brooks Brothers suit, altogether straight ahead as far as professions and life went, work, right? And I wanted to continue to do that work, the work that I was doing, even though it was very different from the work a lot of other people were doing. So, I was sort of, I don't want to say I was trapped, but I was involved in something that had a variety of consequences and elicited a variety of feelings from me. But these were things that ultimately were good for me in the sense that it helped me to reinforce my decision not to drink and to understand that abstinence for me was the only solution. And that was not abstinence on Monday or Tuesday and getting loaded on Saturday and Sunday. It was total and complete abstinence and was a commitment that people who are successful in that make for life. Now, there's a rub because you get the impression that they want you to commit to other things for life,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All this shit about contrition, apologies, getting on your knees, asking for the grace of something that clearly does not exist to come into your life without any proof, any rational explanation that makes sense in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
That I couldn't tolerate.
Yeah, yeah. As soon as I started hearing "Thy will, not mine," that's when that's what really disconnected me from that program concept of belief. It just didn't compute with me. I didn't understand it. And part of the problem was my first experience with recovery was very positive, and it was all about fellowship. That's all it was. I mean, this was 1988 in New York City, in the Village. I mean, there was no mention of God. There was none of that. It was just hanging out with other people who wanted to stay sober, and that two-way street of helping each other was very important. But I didn't, I after that, when I came back to AA again later, after going back out, I was kind of surprised by how much religion and the belief in God was important to my recovery, and that's when I'd never really made that connection again with the people, because so much of it revolved around having faith and having that spiritual experience that you're supposed to have. That's what sent me over the edge the second time, where I backed away from that whole recovery program, because I couldn't identify with that, and I just felt inadequate. Like I was never gonna have a spiritual experience. And that's when I just kind of gave up and said, well, I'm just gonna do what I want to do. And I lost it. Definitely. I went the dark route, because I could not see any way around that my inadequacy of not having a spiritual experience.
Well, I got exposed um, in DC here to the AA elite of Washington. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And they were founded by the Boys of 63, they called themselves, even though Hal Marley didn't come until 64, I think. But, it was Sandy Beach, Hal Marley, and a couple of other local luminaries. Okay.
Hardcore, traditional. Yeah.
They would
Yeah.
have, dinners and lunches for all kinds of famous people that had fallen from grace, who they had taken under their wing. There was Mike Deaver later on running around, and people like that. And that famous congressman, where the ditty was, he was with a stripper in his car, and the stripper jumped out of the car, jumped into the tidal basin, and
Right.
there was a song around town about him. She was only a stripper from the Silver Slipper, but she sure had her ways and means, because this guy was chairman of the Ways and Means Committee.
Right.
People like that, right? And I was
Right.
sitting and this meeting they had, this AA meeting they had, was in every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. in H310 of the U.S. Capitol, on the House side of the U.S. Capitol. And in those days, you could still walk into the U.S. Capitol through a regular entrance they didn't have that screening center and all the other stuff they have now. They just had a guy with a magnetometer and an x-ray machine. If he knew you, which they knew me, I'd come through there every Tuesday. They'd sort of wave at you and just walk in, go to the elevator, go up. Sit in H310, and I sat there for a couple of years, actually, because one of my contacts up there was a legislative aide to a congressman I had to call upon for assistance with some government crap that the company I worked for had gotten involved with, some problems, and I had to go sit with him frequently before I got sober. And then after I got sober, he sort of looked at me and he said, well, something's going on with you. And I told him, and he was a longtime member of the program, old Irish politician. But he was in with all those people, and because that was the environment he worked in on the Hill. I didn't. I was a commercial guy. I didn't work up there. But he took me to this meeting, and I saw the absolute luminaries of that age, of that program. Some of them were actually famous all over the world, like Beach and Marley. They were big shots everywhere in that whole world.
And there
Of
was
that
probably
program.
a promotion of the spiritual aspect of the program.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even though, some of them did great work. Sandy Beach did some things that I know about that were very charitable to other people. I was at a fancy party with him once, and I saw some guy look like a derelict at the party, and I felt like a total outcast at this party, because it was this Capitol Hill crowd that really gave me a pain in my ass. And I was talking to the guy, and I found out that he had been an inmate at the Alexandria City Jail, and that he was living in Sandy Beach's basement.
Wow.
because Sandy Beach had taken him under his wing out of the jail and gave him a place to live. There is no way I would have let a felon from the Alexandria City Jail live in my house with I had two little girls at the time. There's no way I would let him be in anywhere near those children, right? But, Beach did stuff like that. And this guy, Hal Marley, Mr. Attitude of Gratitude, he was famous all over the world for his Attitude of Gratitude talks, which, of course, were grateful to what,
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
But he was kind of a big shot around town, and he had been in the military, thrown out of the military for drinking, became a foreign service officer, ended up at the State Department doing this fancy shit. And he founded the first real employee assistance programs in the federal government. The first meetings and the first EAP at the State Department, which still exists today,
That's
was
a good
his
thing.
It's a very good thing because
Yeah.
foreign service officers drink an awful. They used to in the old days. They
Sure.
can't drink as much now as they used to, but in the old days, CIA and foreign service they were like, they even had a special place to take them that was security cleared up at a place called Chit Chat in Pennsylvania. They'd put them in a black car and drive them up to Chit Chat to dry out, to try to get them straight in a place where if they started talking about something, there were people that were contained that sort of thing. They had accounts up there. It was funny. They had their own drying out spot basically, and he did a lot of good, and actually being grateful for being sober is not a bad thing. So he had a core message that had resonance for a lot of people.
Sure.
But you had to be grateful to God, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of those big shots I met for lunch once, and he told my friend Jeremiah, this guy is hopeless. He'll never get sober because he won't believe in the necessity of having a spiritual life.
Yeah. Oh man, I
This
heard that all the
guy,
time.
they're all dead now. Beach and all of them, all dead.
Anybody who was failing at sobriety, it was only because they didn't believe. And
Yeah, this guy, Ed C., was a big shot with him. And he said, oh, this guy's a hopeless case. I don't want to talk. He said, I don't want to talk to him again because he's an atheist.
Yeah.
A big Roman Catholic. He didn't want to, because he's hopeless. He's going to die. There was that core. There was that. Some of these people way at the top of that pyramid didn't even want to hear about an atheist or an alcoholic in their beloved program.
Sure.
It was obvious. Other people in other places were much more open and compassionate about it. But I met enough people at the tops of that organization would say, oh, we're for everybody. Everybody's welcome, blah, 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 blah. But if you scratch them a little bit, you'd find out that you weren't exactly the belle of the ball as far as they're concerned.
Well, you're a threat to their belief, and that's
they're some of them are famous for
sure.
going around and talking about all this stuff. So, I had my exposure at all kinds of levels in that organization. I had enough of that exposure to know. Well, in the end, I had to totally and completely reject any association with those people at all, even the tangential associations that I had.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, I was okay with my regular daily meetings in my little liberal enclave, and I had this wonderful thing that happened in September of '88, which we'll talk more extensively about another time. And that was the formation of the first meeting for atheists and agnostics here in Washington.
How far into sobriety were you at that point?
About 18 months. It was September of 1988. So I got lucky early on.
Yeah, you did.
And these two people that formed the meeting were hardcore atheists but they were aware of the very toxic and negative reaction that would ensue. But they were very clever. They called the meeting "We Agnostics," and if anybody asked them, well, we named our meeting after a chapter in the Big Book. There's lots of subsequent to that time. There were a lot of meetings called "We Agnostics" around the country, and they also had the meeting
which was a
at
way of still maintaining that connection with the traditional program,
right,
even
but
though
they
the meeting wasn't a traditional meeting.
right, and the time of the meeting was Sunday at 11 a.m., where all the Brahmins went to church here
Ah.
in D.C. They'd all be in church at 11 a.m. on a Sunday, and that meeting was always held in a secular place, having no connection to any church. It was first held at George Washington University Hospital, which is a totally secular uh, institution of higher learning and hospital there. And then when that situation there changed and they had to get a new location, they located to a community center funded by the city called the Hill Center. Very nice, beautiful, historic building. It was an old naval hospital built right after the Civil War, because the Navy Yard where the Navy ships pulled up was just down the street in on Pennsylvania Avenue Northeast, just by the metro stop up there. And that meeting was never affiliated with any religious organization, even by inference.
Mm-hmm.
But that meeting started and kept its notation in the local directory, the local AA directory, as an AA group. And there
Well,
was
was there discussion? I mean, if it was essentially atheist, agnostic, atheist group, was there still mention and obsession with the 12 steps?
none, hardly any,
Wow.
hardly ever a mention of that.
Yeah.
People came like they
Not even
come
a
to the meet.
secular version of the 12 steps.
Well, that stuff was occasionally mentioned. There were people,
Yeah.
there was a spectrum of people. I was on the extreme left wing, and there were people that said they were agnostics, sort of in the middle, and then there was a squishy area where people said, well, you can do the 12 steps, but you can do it in a secular way, and that's what I'm doing. So there was a mixture all the way from the very radical. The founders of the meeting were two old hardcore atheists that got their atheism in the 1930s.
Wow.
They were substantial people, those two. One of them owned some art galleries in Georgetown. She got sober when she drunk her way out of the lease of one of her art galleries. That's what got her in the program. And the other guy was an old guy. He had been at the Manhattan Project with Oppenheimer. He was a security officer, he was a military officer, junior officer, worked for General Groves, and he was the guy that was in charge of putting the bug on Oppenheimer, where they listened.
Wow.
They had a bug in his house and a bug on his phone
Mm-hmm.
because Groves thought he was a red because Oppenheimer had relatives who were involved with it, well, blah, 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 and the wife was involved with it,
Yeah.
old commies and all this stuff. So, yeah, he was quite a personality, and he'd spent his life, guarding nuclear weapons at the Atomic Energy Commission. He was a weird, unusual guy. Brilliant, brilliant guy. University of Chicago, top genius level graduate of. You didn't get up on the Hill, they called it, unless you had an IQ over 150 at the Manhattan Project. And that included the people that were in charge of the guards. The guards at the gate didn't have to have the IQ. But if you were an officer working up on the Hill with General Groves, you were almost a certified genius, even doing those kind of jobs up there. That was that Manhattan Project was really something. But that kind of level, that kind of type of people, but they had the old style sort of, he was, I don't know what his how he did that job, but he had a leftist style orientation toward atheism, very hardcore, very no compromise, nothing. But those two said we couldn't say anything about atheists in the title of our meeting because it would be too controversial. That's the era they came from, right? Oh, we can think and feel this way, but if we say this and that, maybe Joe McCarthy's going to come out of his grave and drag us off to federal prison or something, or deport us.
Right.
So it's a weird situation.
Yeah. So if the meetings didn't have, if you weren't focused on the 12 steps and you were atheists, essentially, what involved the meetings? What were you doing?
I mean, it was talking about our experience.
Yeah.
Talking about what was happening to us in our lives. Talking about if people were feeling like they might drink, or they feeling like they might do something that would lead them to a drink. Talking about that.
Yeah.
And we allowed people that had drug problems to freely talk about all their drug problems. My closest friend in that meeting, who very sadly died in 1999, but who was a close friend of mine for about 10 years before his death, was a very well-known black cultural arts figure in Washington by the name of Gaston Neal. Gaston wouldn't mind me mentioning his name. I mentioned his name here before. But he was a junkie first, alcoholic second, but overall, he was a hardcore, hard left. I won't say this. You can't say the word communism in America without getting people all freaked out.
Yeah.
But he was a very hard left atheist, but, his main problem was heroin. And he managed to get, he got a lot of value out of that meeting because he'd struggled with his addictions. He was about 50 when he came in, and he'd struggled with hardcore addictions for at least 30 years when he came in. He was he'd ended up in the old federal lockup down in Lexington, where they used to send all the old junkies like Billie Holiday and all the jazz musicians down there, Art Pepper, all those folks ended up in Lexington. And my friend Gass, he ended up there in Lexington at one point, locked up in a prison to keep you away from your,
So these
addiction.
are guys that ultimately stayed clean and sober.
Stayed sober and clean.
So then back to the original title here. Why does atheism work in that circumstance?
Atheism works
as opposed to a belief.
Because once you have hit your personal bottom, whatever that is, whatever brought you to the day that you quit, you use logic and reason to reinforce your recovery, not this ridiculous mismatch of so-called principles that involve something that isn't there, that just doesn't exist, something that is not real. Oh, I know we've got people listening going to love that part. Yeah, it's true. Whenever you're talking about spirituality, you're talking about things that aren't real. How's that for a dose? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. There's no written daily program of recovery that makes sense to an atheist. I can't think of one. Can you?
No, I mean, well, it does, in a sense, it does boil down to the word that you use often, abstinence. In a sense, that is a program. I mean, it is at least a concept that you're trying to hold on to and that you're reinforcing. Uh, and coming to that conclusion is a rational process. It's not a
Right,
irrational
right,
belief
right.
concept. It is concrete. I mean, abstinence is black and white. It's a solid in reality concept.
Your intellect and your native abilities lead you to a rational assessment of what brought you there.
Right.
You didn't get into that seat by accident. You're not like in Russia, they tried locking alcoholics up in hospitals, and then they'd send you if you got drunk again back in the old days, they'd send you to a gulag where somebody still was making booze inside the
Right.
gulag,
Right. Right.
that kind of thing,
Yeah.
they just, you know,
There are
uh,
similarities here too with prisons and all of that. I mean, yeah,
yeah,
same sort of
well,
idea.
my friend, the junkie used to, when he'd get out of some rehab place or some drying out place or some legal problem or something like that, the first thing he'd do was hit the street and wait to see who had died of an overdose. And then he would find the dealer that sold the dope to the person that had the
Hmm.
overdose,
Sure.
because if it was killing people, it must be good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Good
And
shit,
he'd
man.
and he'd figure out how to dilute it to the point where he wouldn't die. All right. That's some
Yeah.
weird, that's some powerful stuff. That's the stuff you're fighting on a daily basis. Uh, this urge to fuck up your life that alcoholics have is not accidental. It's a choice you make because you think that's a way that works in life for you. There's
Yeah.
a very powerful influence driving you forward with that behavior. So when you finally have had enough and you get sober, if you're thinking rationally, you see about the forces and powers you are dealing with,
Hmm.
and they are not trivial. They are not
Yeah.
supernatural.
Yeah.
They're purely personal. They're purely psychological. In some cases, they may have genetic components. I don't know. I was the only drunk in my family, so I
Mhm.
can't point to any drunken uncles
Yeah,
or
I
anybody
mean,
to
I think
explain
that's
my
kind of
situation.
I think that's kind of an excuse that people make.
Right, right. Well,
I mean,
I
yeah,
didn't see
yeah,
that shit as applicable to me.
yeah, yeah. It's for me,
But
sobriety and abstinence. It comes down to a simple, rational decision between life and death. When you realize that it has nothing to do with belief, it has nothing to do with any program process at all. It's just that simple, rational calculation. I'm going to die if I do this. I'm going to stay alive if I don't do that. It's very simple, and ultimately, it's scientific method in that respect. It's a trial and error choice. I've seen what it's like to be dead, and I've seen what it's like to be alive. And that choice
right,
is very simple for me. It has nothing to do with belief. It's a rational decision. I'm going to stay alive today as opposed to die.
right. Well, you know, we get to a point where we understand that uh, sobriety and abstinence have implications beyond simply the state of being sober or not drinking. Uh, Having a clear mind, in my mind, has nothing to do with becoming a spiritual being where you have some
No,
entity
no,
outside of
yeah, no.
yourself controlling your actions, but it most certainly gets you in touch with natural law,
Yes, yes.
the natural laws of nature that say we we can and can't do certain things. All right.
Yeah.
And like a good American, I know a bit about natural law, but I wanted to see what AI had to say about
Yeah. Yeah.
natural
It's
law
good. I
today.
like it.
Because AI, well, I mean,
Yeah.
AI seems to know a lot about natural law. And this popped up. It says, natural law is a philosophical concept that proposes there is a universal moral order inherent in human nature, discoverable through reason,
Yeah. Yeah.
which dictates that certain actions are inherently right or wrong and should guide human behavior and positive laws.
Mhm.
Unlike positive laws, like what the current occupant of the White House likes to abuse,
Yeah. Human made.
yeah, which are human-made rules enacted by governments, natural law is considered pre-existing, fundamental, and superior to any human-created legislation or principle.
Yeah.
Right? We're governed by the the natural law of the universe. Don't murder, don't
Yeah.
steal,
Yeah.
don't despoil your natural
Yeah.
surroundings.
Which is
Uh,
reinforced by trial and error. Uh,
right. And
the simple scientific method. And it goes back to what you mentioned before, alcohol being a poison. I mean, it's a simple
it
trial and
can,
error experience. You drink a poison, it's going to kill you. If you don't drink that poison,
right.
you're going to stay
Well,
alive.
it can poison these substances can poison your brain and put you in a situation where you do things, all right, that violate every natural principle you're
Yeah,
connected with.
yeah,
Fortunately for me, I never got into a situation where it was important for somebody to incarcerate me or lock me up or that sort of thing. But our prisons and jails are filled with people who did what they did when they were loaded.
yeah,
All right.
very much.
Always have been.
Yeah,
Always have been. So, unlike that medicine that can lead you to violate natural law, living a more rational life allows you to live more in accord with natural law. It
sure.
doesn't make you a perfect moral being. It doesn't make you like, you know, sitting with a catechism. It doesn't make you absolutely acceptable to all of these
Yeah,
people with their ideas about how the
right,
world
right.
should operate that are based on the intervention of things that don't
Yeah.
exist. But it does get you more in tune with who and what you really want to be.
It
All
also gives
right.
you a better chance at surviving.
Right. It's a good
I
thing
mean, it's
being
pretty simple to me. It's like life and
I'll
death,
tell
man,
you,
you know?
it's a really great thing being an old man like me and not a young, good-looking
Yeah.
corpse like a bunch of my younger friends.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah. Yeah.
they were damn good looking when they died, but
Yeah,
they're still
they
dead.
they
Okay, all
proved
right.
that whole trial and error existence, you know? I mean, they
Give me this.
yeah.
Tell me, give me this beat up old body anytime compared to that shit.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, yes.
that dying young. I mean, I never wanted to emulate Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin, or Jimi Hendrix, even though I think about them very frequently. I
Yeah,
never
yeah,
wanted to.
yeah.
I didn't really want to go, but I was in my own sort of way as a not famous person. I was really heading toward that sort of
Yeah,
demise.
you were tempted to jump off that bridge. I
I
mean,
was ready to jump
sure.
off the roof of that nice
Yeah,
condo I was living in
yeah,
and just end it all. But I didn't because I made a decision. All
right.
right. And, I learned something on the journey along the way, as have you.
Hmm.
You're facing challenges in your life to this day that you couldn't face
Right.
without having some good sense and equanimity and the
Some
ability to
some
form
rational thought and
relationships.
again,
So,
good decisions. Yes, I mean,
well, I
yeah.
finally got to the point where I can have a wonderful relationship in my life.
There you go. Yeah.
That never, ever would have happened.
Oh, yeah. yeah.
You know what? I think you have an idea of what that
Yeah,
means to me,
yeah.
and I
My
have
history
an
tells
idea.
that story too. I mean, he's
Yeah,
definitely, yeah,
exactly, exactly. So the journey based on rationality had the positive results that we intended because we adhered to a couple of basic ideas that were rationally formed and executed in a rational way
yeah,
without the intervention of some outside power
yeah,
directing us and hallucinating some sort of result
yeah.
that really has only to do with us, not with
Well, yeah, I
anything
think
that
it's
comes up.
important. We are
You know?
taking responsibility for our sobriety. I mean, I appreciate that aspect of being an atheist. That I need some credit for what I'm doing. I mean, I'm not going to give credit to something outside of me for making these rational decisions to stay sober.
Right. Absolutely. And we do it as a result of a comprehensive, rational analysis of the efficacy of that decision we made, and most importantly, the idea of that commitment based on that decision to that simple word abstinence that we go over and
Yeah,
over and over again, that we hear people questioning well, I may as well drink. I've heard that recently.
yeah, yeah.
No,
No,
I may as well. No, I
yeah,
may as well not drink. Okay. I not may as well drink at all because unlike normal drinkers, I can't handle that
yeah,
shit.
yeah. And that's learned
Okay.
experience. Lots of trial and error, and
I proved it to myself. You know,
the
I knew that.
scientific method again. Here we go. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I know there
pretty
was
simple.
no, but there was no divine intervention. And I'm delighted to hear there was no divine intervention on your side as well.
Yeah, and there you go. That's the bottom line. That's why atheism works. Because we don't fall back on something outside of ourselves. It's us. We make that decision, and it's us. It's we take responsibility for that.
Right. In every episode, though, just about that we do when we touch upon these topics, we also absolutely have to acknowledge that if you think that the supernatural world works for you and it's keeping you sober, you, your family, and everybody around you are a hell of a lot better off because of that.
Yeah,
So, in that sense, we're all for it, right? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah,
if
yeah.
that's,
Whatever gets you through
but
the night,
well, that's what
I
they
mean,
say,
you know.
uh, bless you. But it's all part of a discovery of resources within ourselves that we didn't think we had.
Yeah, yeah,
That's the other part. You find out that you have resilience and resources as a human being that for years, in most, some decades in some cases, we went along saying, no, I can't do that. I don't have that. I can't be that. Fuck that. You can be anything you need to be in this life if you commit to it.
yeah,
You can be. There's no guarantees you're going to be,
yeah,
but I certainly found that as close to a guarantee as I could uh, think of was the guarantee that if I uh, kept my decision to stop drinking first in mind
mhm,
and my commitment to abstinence as a central factor in all of that, that I would get to do all these other things sober.
yeah,
Okay. I wasn't the best father in the world because I traveled too much, worked too much, and, there were things with a marriage and all kinds of things. But neither one of my children ever saw me drink. Okay. My first wife saw me drink. My
mhm,
second wife, even that I'm no longer married to never saw me drink. And certainly the woman I'm married to now, I would have had one chance with her of a drunken night, okay? And that never would have happened, all right? Because she's got things that just prohibit her. She has no desire whatsoever to deal with an alcoholic, okay?
Mhm.
She's dealt with them, and she doesn't want to deal with any more of them. And that's that all that wonderful things that happen. If I hadn't have made that rational decision then and stuck to that decision, never would have happened. And if I'd tried that other way with all this hocus pocus and, there's all this confusion and, ridiculous fantasy, I would have ended up certainly rejecting that and starting up again.
Yeah.
So my atheism as a foundation of my sobriety really saved my ass.
There you go. Yeah.
So that's what it boiled down to,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Can we get
yeah.
just
I think
simple
in my
terms?
case too. I mean, I didn't really feel like I was truly sober
Yeah.
until I recognized that I was an atheist and that I'm responsible for that decision to stay sober. I no longer had an excuse to not be sober because it comes down to me.
Yeah, but let's not get our listeners confused. We're not sitting here going, "Hallelujah, I'm an atheist."
Yeah,
Hallelujah.
yeah, yeah,
No, it's hallelujah, I'm alive.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
And my
yeah,
atheism helped me stay alive.
yeah.
It's the result that produces the positive outcome.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
The methodology that we used to get here was a rational one,
yeah.
not a fanciful one.
Yeah, and
So
and
that's
then
what.
and then also don't forget that it's not a lone wolf project. I mean, we do stay connected, and we depend on each other. We still have meetings that we depend on, and maintaining that communication with each other, that's still very important. I mean, so it's not just our own selfish desire to stay sober. It also requires that keeping that connection with other people trying to stay sober.
It's a two-way street,
Yeah.
okay, and it goes both ways. And I mean, this gets us to the end of another episode where I think we're actually in accord, Michael. I'm not, I didn't make all this shit up. It's just sort of obvious. But it seems that we need to reiterate to some of our fellow atheists from time to time that atheism is sufficient unto itself as a propagating factor in a positive, sober life.
Yeah.
It helps you reinforce your decision to quit and stay stopped, whatever your Jones was,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe I think we maybe accomplished our purpose today.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
And
I would simply rephrase it a little bit. I would say that a lack of belief in the supernatural being is what has helped me stay sober. I mean, because if you use the word atheism, it sounds like a specific concrete philosophy or a religion, but it's that lack of faith in the supernatural being for me.
well, thank you.
That
Thank you for giving people a sugar pill at the end of our. It's atheism, but no, it's great because that's absolutely true too. And we both have a a fulsome and valid reason to remain what hopeful.
Oh
Is that
yeah,
the word you use?
yeah. I
Hopeful.
mean, bottom line, that's what we get from staying sober. We get this sense of hope, and it keeps us going. I mean, I keep coming back because I hope I have
Right.
that sense of hope.
And within that reasoning, we come up with a beautiful, nice, well, they say a beautiful way. I love that. See, I got so indoctrinated. No, we come up with a good way of ending these podcasts, okay? Which is to wish everybody
Peace and love. Peace and love, baby. Yeah.
and a happy day or evening wherever life has taken you today. Life's doing good for us
Yes.
And we hope it's doing good for you. And
Yeah.
there we go. Peace and love.
Peace and love.